There was also a lot of activity last night at Annie Guthrie's house. If you were following me, I was posting a lot on YouTube stories and on TikTok because I was out there late last night. Basically, we got word that there were these three deputies that showed up to Annie Guthrie's house. We didn't know, at first I didn't know if they were like FBI or deputies, but when they left, I was able to look and see they had like a deputy logo on their side. And they were there for 3 hours. There were three of them, from what I could count. They showed up, they went inside, and they had some equipment that they brought inside, and then we could see flashes from inside. We could see light flashes, which they were taking pictures inside. It was pretty obvious. At first, they were just taking pictures near the garage area. I could see through the windows, but then I was watching, and you could see they were moving throughout the house. They were taking pictures in different parts of the house. They were there for about 3 hours. They had blue gloves on, I noticed, when they came out. And after being there for 3 hours, came out, got in the cars, didn't say a word, and then slowly drove off. So the timing is interesting because, remember, this was happening around the same time that, or a little bit after that, Savannah Guthrie had put her video out, saying that they would be willing to pay. And I can read, you've probably seen the video by now, but what she said was, I wrote down the verbatim. She said, "We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us and we will pay."
9:48 p.m. Tucson, Arizona, January 31st, 2026. A garage door opens, a car pulls in, an 84-year-old woman steps out, slowly, carefully, the way she always does. The garage door begins to close, and in the 2 seconds it takes for that door to seal shut, Nancy Guthrie disappears from the world. Not from a parking lot, not from a dark alley, from her own home, the place she was supposed to be safest. The Tucson night is quiet the way only desert nights can be, that specific kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Inside that house, a pacemaker is humming. A Bluetooth signal is syncing. A woman who just had dinner with her family is settling in for the night, completely unaware that someone has been watching her, not just tonight, for weeks. By 2:28 a.m., that pacemaker goes silent. No distress call, no broken window. No signs of a struggle that the neighbors would have heard, just a signal that flatlines in the dark, and a woman who vanishes so completely that one of the most recognizable faces in American journalism drops everything, flies to Tucson, and starts asking questions that her own family may not want answered. Because here's what you need to understand about this case. This is not a cold case. Nancy Guthrie has been missing since February 1st, 2026. The FBI is active, the forensics are fresh, and the people closest to Nancy are sitting on 7 details that don't add up. 7 details that Savannah Guthrie, Harvard Law graduate, NBC News anchor, and Nancy's own daughter knows about. And based on everything she's said and done since her mother vanished, she's not just grieving. She's calculating. Before we go any further, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this case is still developing and you do not want to miss what comes next. We are going deep today. Stay with me. To understand what happened to Nancy Guthrie, you first have to understand the family she was embedded in. Because this isn't just a kidnapping story, it's a family story. And in family stories, the details that matter most are never the obvious ones. They're the ones hiding in plain sight, dressed up as normal. Nancy had 3 children. Annie is the eldest. She lives in Tucson in the affluent Catalina Foothills neighborhood, the kind of zip code where the houses have names and the driveways are longer than most people's apartments. Annie was the daughter who stayed, while her siblings built lives elsewhere. Then Annie planted roots in the same city as her mother. That proximity made her the default caretaker, the one who knew which medications Nancy took and at what time, the one who understood her mother's limited mobility, the one who had memorized the rhythm of Nancy's week down to the hour. Saturday dinners at Annie's house weren't just a tradition, they were a lifeline. And Annie held the other end of that line. Savannah is the middle child. You know her face. NBC News anchor, Harvard Law graduate, one of the most composed and precise communicators in American media. She built her life far from Tucson, in the bright lights of national television, in the language of facts and deadlines and carefully chosen words. But the moment her mother vanished, Savannah came home, not just emotionally, strategically. Cameron is the youngest, the son. And in the architecture of this family's grief, Cameron represents the raw, unfiltered version, the one who isn't calculating, isn't managing a narrative, isn't choosing his words for an audience. He is simply a son who doesn't know where his mother is. Then there's Tommaso, Annie's husband, the son-in-law. A musician, his band, Early Black, is a fixture in Tucson's Americana rock scene. Tommaso is charming, social, embedded in a tight-knit community of artists and performers. He is, by all outward appearances, a devoted husband and a caring son-in-law. He was also the last person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. Not Annie, not a hired driver, Tommaso. He drove Nancy home that night. He watched that garage door close. And the question that the FBI keeps circling back to, the question that nobody in that family has answered cleanly, is a simple one. Why didn't Annie drive her own mother home? 4 miles, that's all it was. 4 miles between Annie's house and Nancy's front door. So why did the son-in-law make that drive instead of the daughter who knew every detail of her mother's care? Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. I want to know who's following this case with me. January 31st, 2026 starts like every other Saturday in Nancy Guthrie's world. At 5:32 p.m., she opens the Uber app, or maybe someone opens it for her, the way families quietly absorb the small tasks that age makes harder. A car pulls up to her home. She climbs in slowly, carefully, the way she always does. She's dressed for dinner. She's in a good mood. She's headed 4 miles up the road to Annie's house in the Catalina foothills, the same house she's been going to every Saturday for as long as this routine has existed. To Nancy, this is just another Saturday. The rhythm is familiar. The destination is safe. The people waiting for her are her own blood. That's the thing about routines. They feel like armor. They're not. At Annie's house, the evening unfolds the way it always does. There's food on the table, laughter in the room, the comfortable noise of a family that knows each other's stories. It's game night. Nancy is present, not just physically, but fully. This is her joy. Her eldest daughter's home, her grandchildren nearby, the warmth of a family that still shows up for each other every single week. For a few hours on January 31st, everything is exactly as it should be. Nobody at that table knows it's the last time. The dinner winds down, the plates are cleared, goodnights are said. And here is where the evening makes its first wrong turn. So subtle, so seemingly insignificant, that you could miss it entirely if you weren't paying attention. Nancy doesn't leave with Annie. At 9:48 p.m., it is Tommaso, Annie's husband, the son-in-law, who pulls the car out of the driveway and drives Nancy home. 4 miles, a 12-minute drive at most. Annie stays behind. The woman who knows her mother's medication schedule, her mobility needs, her entire world, she stays behind. And her husband, the musician, the social connector, the man at the outer edge of Nancy's inner circle, he becomes the last link in the chain. The car pulls into Nancy's driveway. The garage door opens. Nancy steps out. While Tommaso watches. The garage door begins its descent, and at 9:50 p.m. it seals shut. 120 seconds. That is the entire window. From 9:48 to 9:50, Tommaso is the last confirmed human being to see Nancy Guthrie alive. The garage door closes, the car backs out, the street goes quiet, and what happens inside that house over the next 4 hours will change everything. 4 hours and 38 minutes. That is the gap between the garage door closing and the moment everything goes wrong. 4 hours and 38 minutes, where, on the surface, nothing appears to be happening. The street is quiet. The neighborhood is asleep. Tucson in the early hours of February 1st is still and dark and completely unaware that somewhere inside a house on that street, a clock is running out. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker stops transmitting. Here's what that means in plain language. Modern pacemakers don't just regulate the heart, they communicate. They sync via Bluetooth to a bedside monitor, usually a phone or a dedicated device, and they transmit data in real time. Heart rate, rhythm, irregularities. That data gets logged, time-stamped, and in many cases sent directly to a cardiologist's system. It is, in the most literal sense, a digital heartbeat, a continuous quiet signal that says, "She's here, she's alive, she's okay." At 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, that signal stops. Not slows, not fluctuates, stops. Which means one of two things happened in that house. Either Nancy suffered a catastrophic medical event triggered by extreme stress, or someone physically interfered with the device or its connection. Either way, the digital heart of that house went dark, and nobody called 911. But someone was already there. The doorbell camera catches him, and the first thing you notice, the thing that every law enforcement expert who has reviewed this footage points to immediately, is the way he moves. He doesn't rush, he doesn't crouch, he doesn't look over his shoulder the way a nervous man would. He saunters, slow, deliberate, unhurried. The walk of someone who has already done the math and knows exactly how much time he has. He sees the camera. He doesn't run. Instead, he reaches into a nearby potted plant, pulls out a single leaf, and uses it to cover the lens. No tools, no tape, no sophisticated counter-surveillance equipment, just a leaf. Because he didn't need to bring anything. He already knew where the camera was, what angle it covered, and that a leaf would be enough. He knew this house. And when he left behind three things: Nancy's phone, her Apple Watch, and her heart medication, not stolen, left, deliberately. Because whoever took Nancy Guthrie understood exactly what those three items meant without her. The phone meant no calls for help. The Apple Watch meant no location tracking. The medication meant something far darker. Without it, Nancy's heart was already on a countdown. Every hour without that medication was an hour closer to a crisis her body could not survive. Whoever took Nancy Guthrie didn't just take a woman, they took away her ability to survive. I need you to stay with me here, because what the FBI found inside Annie and Tomaso's house 6 weeks later is something the mainstream media is barely talking about. And it changes the entire shape of this investigation. 60 days after Nancy Guthrie vanished, 3 sheriff's deputies and a federal agent walked back into Annie and Tommaso Cione's home, and they stayed for 3 hours. Think about what that means. This is not a house that belongs to a suspect. Officially, Annie and Tommaso are victims in this case, a family devastated by the disappearance of an elderly mother. And yet, 60 days in, law enforcement is still showing up at their door with gloves on and cameras rolling, still treating their home like a location that has something left to give. The neighbors watched from their driveways. Some of them filmed it. The footage made its way onto TikTok and YouTube within hours, and what you see in those clips is not a routine welfare check. Through the garage windows, you can see flashes of light, bright, high-intensity bursts, the kind that don't come from a standard flashlight. What you're watching is forensic photography, investigators documenting every surface, every corner, every inch of that house in clinical detail. But more than that, they are likely using alternate light sources, specialized equipment that causes certain substances to fluoresce. Blood, bodily fluids, trace evidence that has been cleaned up but never fully erased. You can scrub a floor until it looks spotless. Under an ALS, the story it tells is a different one entirely. The deputies who walked out of that house were wearing blue nitrile gloves. Standard procedure? Yes. But in the context of this case, those gloves carry weight. They mean the house is still hot, still active, still yielding evidence 60 days after the fact. Then, there was the other visitor. An agent from ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children Unit, arrived at the Cione household carrying a Cellebrite device. Now, the sheriff's department was quick to clarify that the unit name doesn't define the crime being investigated. But here is what you need to understand about Cellebrite. It is a digital extraction tool, a device so powerful it can crack encrypted phones, recover deleted messages, and reconstruct conversations that someone believed were gone forever. Law enforcement calls it a digital skeleton key. You don't bring a digital skeleton key to a house unless you already know exactly which lock you need to open, which phone, which tablet, which hidden hard drive. The FBI doesn't guess with Cellebrite. They arrive with a target. What was on those devices? What did someone delete on February 1st, the same morning Nancy's pacemaker went silent? Then there's the car. Annie and Tomaso's vehicle has been sitting in an FBI evidence lot for over 6 weeks. In forensic terms, that timeline speaks volumes. A car returned in 48 hours is clean. A car held for 6 weeks has become a mobile crime scene. Investigators are still pulling data from the GPS logs, still analyzing the fibers in the upholstery, still examining soil samples from the trunk that may match a secondary location nobody has named yet. And perhaps most chilling of all, investigators are looking for voids, places inside that house where objects used to sit and no longer do. A gap on a shelf, a clean rectangle on a dusty surface, an absence that tells the story of something removed in a hurry. In forensic investigation, what's missing is sometimes louder than what remains. Subscribe for more Nancy updates so you won't miss a single development. This case is moving fast, and the next detail may be the one that breaks it wide open. There are grieving daughters. And then there is Savannah Guthrie. Most people, when their mother goes missing, fall apart in public. They cry at press conferences. They beg on camera. They say the wrong thing at the wrong time because grief doesn't care about optics. Savannah Guthrie has not done any of that. What she has done instead is something far more deliberate, far more controlled, and, if you know how to read it, far more revealing. Savannah graduated from Harvard Law. She has spent decades in front of cameras, in courtrooms, trunk in the kind of high-pressure environments where every word is a choice and every silence is a statement. She understands, better than almost anyone, the geometry of an investigation, how information moves, how narratives form, how the wrong sentence at the wrong moment can collapse a case or protect a suspect. She is not a passive participant in this story. She is an active architect. Watch her at the March 2nd memorial. The cameras are rolling. The national press is there. The entire country is watching a daughter grieve in public. And in that moment, Savannah Guthrie walks up to Tommaso, her sister's husband, the last person to see her mother alive, and she puts her arm around him. She holds him, in front of everyone, in the language of public grief. That gesture is an absolution. It says, "This man is not my enemy. This man is not the target of my anger." It signals to the watching world, and more importantly to whoever is responsible for Nancy's disappearance, that Savannah is not pointing her finger at the son-in-law. She is protecting him from the narrative. She is deliberately, consciously redirecting the story. But watch where she doesn't go. Watch who she doesn't hold. The careful distance Savannah maintains from her sister Annie is not the distance of two people processing grief differently. It is architectural. It is chosen. Every public appearance, every statement, every carefully managed interaction tells the same story. Savannah is protecting Tommaso, and she is managing Annie, not comforting her, not standing beside her, managing her, the way you manage someone whose story you are not entirely sure you believe. And then there is February 7th. Savannah looks directly into the camera and says 7 words that should have stopped every journalist in America cold. "We received your message and we understand." Slow down. Rewind. Play that sentence back. She is not speaking to the public. The public didn't send a message. She is not speaking to law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't need a televised acknowledgement. She is speaking to a specific person, someone who communicated something to the Guthrie family through a channel we are not privy to. And the word understand is the most loaded word in that sentence. You don't say you understand something unless the why has been explained to you, unless a motive has been delivered, unless someone, somewhere, told this family exactly why Nancy was taken. Savannah Guthrie knows something, and she is choosing, very carefully, what to do with it. Think about this for a second. A Harvard-trained lawyer and national news anchor just sent a coded message on live television. Who was she talking to? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. Let's talk about the man on the doorbell camera. 5'9", average build, moving with the kind of unhurried confidence that doesn't come from training, it comes from familiarity. On his back, an Ozark Trail backpack. If you don't recognize that brand, here's what you need to know. Ozark Trail is a Walmart exclusive. You can't buy it at REI. You can't order it from a tactical supply store. It is the most common, most forgettable backpack in America. The kind of bag that disappears in a crowd because half the crowd is carrying one. That choice, whether intentional or not, tells investigators something important about who they're looking for. This is not a professional. This is not someone with access to specialized equipment or a network of criminal resources. This is someone ordinary, someone who shops at Walmart, someone you would walk past in a parking lot and never look twice at. But it's the holster that stops every expert cold. On his hip, visible in the doorbell footage, is a large frame revolver holster. Inside it, a small pistol. Wrong gun, wrong holster, wrong fit. To anyone with real firearms experience, that combination is immediately jarring. A trained shooter, a law enforcement professional, even a serious hobbyist, none of them make that mistake. You don't carry a compact pistol in a holster built for a full-size revolver unless you grabbed what was available, unless the gun was borrowed, unless the gun was acquired recently and in a hurry by someone who owns a holster but doesn't really live in that world. This is someone with access to a weapon, not someone who belongs to one. And that profile, ordinary, local, unsocially connected, but not professionally criminal, is exactly what led investigators into the heart of Tucson's Americana rock scene. Tommaso Cione's band, Early Black, is well known in that community. Tight-knit, overlapping social circles, the kind of scene where everyone knows everyone and Saturday nights blur together. One name that surfaced early in the investigation is Dominic Evans, the band's drummer. Evans was brought in for a 40-minute FBI interview, not because he was charged, not because there was direct evidence linking him to the scene, but because his physical profile, his height, his build, matched what the doorbell camera captured on the night Nancy Guthrie was taken. 40 minutes is not a casual conversation. 40 minutes means the FBI had specific questions, specific inconsistencies they needed him to address. B. Evans has not been charged. But in this investigation, proximity is everything. The social map of this crime leads back every single time to the orbit of Annie and Tomaso's household. This wasn't a stranger who picked a random house on a random night. This was someone who knew the address, someone who knew the routine, someone who had been to a Saturday dinner or knew someone who had. The FBI is not interested in January 31st anymore. They already know what happened on January 31st. What they are obsessed with, what keeps pulling investigators back to the same streets, the same timestamps, the same cell tower data, are two dates that most people covering this case have barely mentioned. January 11th, January 24th, both Saturdays, both nights when Nancy Guthrie followed her routine and had dinner at Annie's house. Both nights when an Uber pulled up to her home, waited in the driveway, and drove her 4 miles up into the Catalina foothills. Both nights when the garage door at Annie's house opened and closed at predictable times. Both nights when the lights in Nancy's home went out at roughly the same hour. Someone was watching. Not watching Nancy's house specifically. That would be too obvious, too risky in a neighborhood like that. They were watching the route. They were clocking the Uber arrival times. They were noting how long the car idled in the driveway. They were learning the rhythm of the garage door, when it opened, how long it stayed open, when it sealed shut for the night. They were watching the lights go out, room by room, and calculating exactly how long it took for an 84-year-old woman to settle in for the evening. This is called predatory surveillance, and it requires patience. It requires multiple visits. It requires someone who could be on those streets on a Saturday night without raising a single eyebrow, someone who belonged there or knew someone who did. The FBI's focus on those two specific Saturdays tells us something that no press conference has stated outright, but that every investigator understands implicitly. This crime was not impulsive. It was not opportunistic. It was not a random act of violence against a vulnerable elderly woman. It was harvested, planned over weeks, refined over multiple observations, executed with the kind of precision that only comes from preparation. This crime wasn't committed on January 31st. It was rehearsed for weeks. And that is the detail that should break your heart the most. Because what was being surveilled, what was being studied and mapped and weaponized, was Nancy Guthrie's independence, her joy, the thing she looked forward to every single week. She took that Uber because she didn't want to be a burden. She kept that Saturday routine because it made her feel connected, capable, alive. And someone watched that routine, learned it, and used it against her. They didn't just steal a woman, they turned her happiness into a trap. 7 details, 7 things that don't add up, 7 reasons Savannah Guthrie is not just grieving, she is hunting. Let's go through them one by one. 1. The repeat canvass. When the FBI canvasses a neighborhood, they do it once. They knock on doors, they collect statements, they move on. Standard procedure. But investigators have returned to Annie Street 3 separate times. 3. That doesn't happen because the first canvass was incomplete. It happens because someone lied. It happens because a cell tower ping placed a suspect's phone on that street at a time that directly contradicts what that person told investigators. It happens because the digital footprint and the human testimony are not matching up, and the FBI keeps going back until they do. 3 canvases means someone on that street is not telling the truth, and the FBI already knows who. 2. The 120-second window, 9:48 to 9:50 p.m. 2 minutes. The garage door opens, Nancy steps inside, the garage door closes. Tommaso is sitting in that car watching it happen. In those 120 seconds, the last chapter of Nancy Guthrie's freedom is written. The question investigators keep returning to is not just what happened inside that house afterward, it's what happened in that car before Tommaso drove away. What did he see? What did he know? What did he do next? 2 minutes is a lifetime when you're the last person to see someone alive. 3. The seized vehicle. Annie and Tommaso's car has been sitting in an FBI evidence lot for over 6 weeks. 6 weeks. If that car was clean, it would have been returned in 48 hours. The fact that it hasn't been returned means it is still talking. The GPS logs are being reconstructed. The fibers in the upholstery are being matched to secondary locations. The soil in the trunk is being analyzed. Somewhere in that car is a coordinate, a fiber, a microscopic trace of something that places it somewhere it was never supposed to be. 4. The Cellebrite visit. A federal agent showed up at the Keone household with a device capable of cracking encrypted phones and recovering deleted messages. Someone deleted something on February 1st. The same morning, Nancy's pacemaker went silent. The same morning, she vanished. That deletion was not random. That deletion was deliberate, and the FBI is currently reading every word of it. 5. The memorial body language. At the March 2nd memorial, in front of the national press, Savannah Guthrie puts her arm around Tommaso. She holds him. She does not hold Annie. She does not stand beside her sister. She manages her from a careful, deliberate distance. A Harvard-trained lawyer does not make accidental gestures in front of cameras. Every movement Savannah makes in public is a choice. She is telling us something. Anna, she is telling us exactly where she thinks the truth lives, and it is not with the son-in-law. 6. The Saturday surveillance, January 11th, January 24th, January 31st, 3 Saturdays, 3 rehearsals, and 1 execution. The kidnapper didn't stumble onto Nancy's routine. He studied it, he mapped it, he refined it over weeks until he knew it better than she did. That level of preparation doesn't come from a stranger. It comes from someone inside the circle. 7. We understand. On February 7th, Savannah looks into the camera and says, "We received your message and we understand. Not we received your demands. Not we are cooperating with law enforcement. We understand." That word, understand, means the why has been explained. A motive has been communicated. Someone told this family exactly why Nancy was taken. And Savannah Guthrie, the most precise communicator in American journalism, chose that word on purpose. This is no longer just a kidnapping, it is a negotiation. And Savannah is sitting at the table. The investigation has left Tucson, not abandoned it. The streets, the neighbors, the doorbell footage, the garage door are all still part of the evidence architecture. But the center of gravity has shifted. The FBI's regional command post in Phoenix is now running point on this case, and that transition tells you everything about where things stand. When a missing persons case moves from local sheriff to federal command, it means the investigation has outgrown the city it started in. It means the leads are no longer just local. It means they have something, and they are building toward a moment. They are using genetic genealogy. If you followed the Golden State Killer case, you know exactly what this means. DNA recovered from the scene at Nancy's home didn't match anything in CODIS, the National Criminal Database. So the FBI did what they did with Joseph James DeAngelo. They uploaded that DNA profile to public ancestry databases. They are not looking for the kidnapper directly. They are looking for his cousins, his second cousins, his distant relatives who uploaded their DNA to find their family tree and had no idea they were handing investigators a thread that leads straight back to a killer. The FBI pulls that thread, builds the family map, and works backward until there's only one name left. That name is coming. The Cellebrite extraction is running parallel. The deleted messages pulled from the devices at Annie and Tomaso's house are being reconstructed conversation by conversation, timestamp by timestamp. Every deleted thread is a breadcrumb. Every wiped file is a ghost that forensic technology is learning to see again. Whatever was erased on February 1st is being rebuilt in an FBI lab right now. And then there's the border. Nancy Guthrie's home sits 60 miles from the United States-Mexico border. That proximity has never left the investigation. Sheriff Chris Nanos has maintained what investigators call a living presumption, the belief, based on available evidence, that Nancy is alive and being held. You don't maintain a living presumption for an 84-year-old woman with a heart condition out of sentiment. You maintain it because the evidence supports it. Because the border represents a live corridor. Because someone with the right connections could move a person across 60 miles of desert and into a network that makes them extraordinarily difficult to find. And then, Sheriff Nanos said one word that changed the temperature of this entire investigation. Closer, not hopeful, not ongoing, closer. You don't use that word in a case with this much national attention unless you have something concrete, a name, a DNA match, a location pulled from a GPS log, a reconstructed message that puts someone at the scene. Sheriff Nanos said closer, and every investigator, every journalist, every true crime analyst who heard that word understood exactly what it meant. The net is tightening. Nancy Guthrie didn't ask for any of this. She was an 84-year-old woman who took an Uber to her daughter's house because she didn't want to be a burden. She kept her Saturday routine because it gave her joy, connection, purpose. She trusted the people around her with the details of her life, her medication schedule, her mobility, her predictable, beautiful, ordinary routine. And someone in her circle took that trust and built a trap out of it. The garage door closes. That image has lived in this story from the very beginning, and it lives here at the end too, because it is the image that defines everything. 9:50 p.m., the door seals shut, and somewhere between that moment and 2:28 a.m., a family fractures in ways that may never fully heal. Look at the space between Savannah and Annie. Not the distance in miles. Savannah flew in from New York. Annie lives 4 miles from where her mother vanished. The distance that matters is the one you see in every photograph, every press appearance, every carefully managed public moment. Two sisters who should be holding each other up are instead orbiting each other at a careful, deliberate remove. Savannah is protecting something, Annie is carrying something, and the space between them is filled with everything neither one of them is saying out loud. And then there is Cameron, the youngest, the son. He is not calculating. He is not managing a narrative or architecting a public image. He is simply a man who doesn't know where his mother is. In every image, in every statement, Cameron represents the version of this grief that has no strategy, just loss, raw and unfiltered and devastating. And he is the emotional baseline against which everything his sisters do is measured. And when you hold his grief up next to Savannah's precision and Annie's silence, the contrast is almost unbearable. An 84-year-old woman just wanted to have dinner with her family. She took an Uber because she didn't want to ask for too much. She kept her Saturday routine because it made her feel like herself, independent, loved, connected to the people who mattered most. Someone in that circle studied that routine, mapped it, and used it to take her. Nancy Guthrie deserves to be found, and based on everything we have covered today, the DNA, the Cellebrite trails, the GPS logs, the coded messages, the body language, the border logic, and one sheriff who said the word closer like he meant it, I believe she will be. We will be here when that happens. If this case has you thinking, and I know it does, leave your theories below. Subscribe so you're here when the next update drops. Share this with someone who needs to know Nancy's name. She deserves to be found.